Hey, good morning. Welcome to AeroSafe, a product of Gilbert Aviation. Here we talk about weather from the general aviation pilot's perspective. We're going to look at areas of VFR weather and areas of IFR weather, look at potential hazards within each of those pockets, an effort to help you make a more informed go or no-go decision. My name's Erica Gilbert. I'm a flight instructor with instrument instruction privileges located in Central Kentucky. Weather is a passion of mine, and I really love talking about it to help keep other pilots safe. So we're going to start here by looking at the surface analysis chart for the contiguous US. We've got a lot going on, right? It's winter. That's kind of to be expected. We can start off by talking about some notable areas here. Now, being on the East Coast, that's where my eyes tend to fall when I look at the synoptic chart. So here from West Virginia down to the Panhandle of Florida, we've got a stationary front. That's kind of bringing a mix of some precipitation to a lot of those areas and cloud coverage. Now, if we follow that stationary front up to the north, we've got a low pressure system, and where all three of those fronts come together, we've got an occluded front that stretches from Lake Michigan over to the top of Western Virginia. Now that's dumping a lot of icy, wintry mix where the occluded front connects to that other low pressure system. There's a lot of yucky stuff going up there in Michigan and over the lake. If we look in the top right area, the northeast of the states, with New York and all the little ones over there, all the little states over there, we see a lot of precipitation that is falling and forming a lot of really yucky stuff. If we move our way west, there's this stretch of air that's just kind of not a lot going on. That cold front had recently passed, and they're waiting on some incoming fronts here. Some more warm fronts followed by cold fronts followed by occluded fronts. My guess is that as those move and maybe gain in some strength, we're going to see a continuing growth of this precipitation here as it moves across the U.S. Over Texas, the south and Midwest area, again, not a whole lot going on. We see some radar returns for some precipitation here, but not much. Southwestern U.S. has a lot of high pressure systems going on. Typically, as pilots, we know that's associated with good weather for flying. In terms of precipitation, there's very unlikely to have any type of convective activity going on. However, we can see on the surface some potential low visibility or turbulence. As we move up into the northwestern part of the country, so Washington and Oregon, we see another warm front followed by a cold front, and where they meet on the north, an occluded front. Some low pressure up there as well. Way up at the tip, we can't see it here, but that's bringing a lot of wintry mix and precipitation, a lot of really yucky stuff that'll surely just get worse as the fronts move across. So just looking at the synoptic chart, places I would not want to be flying today would be up in the northeast, down over here below this front here, so in southeastern Georgia and North Florida. Here right in the middle of the U.S., over Kansas here, and then up in the northeast. But the synoptic chart doesn't tell the whole story, right? So those are generally going to be areas of IFR weather. But just because we have IFR weather or VFR weather, that doesn't mean that it's necessarily inherently safe or unsafe. If we look on the Flight Service website, 1-800 Weather Brief, we've got our home with the interactive map, and we can get a little bit better picture of what's going on in terms of weather observations at the different airports. So when we go to the map page on 1-800 Weather Brief, we can get a little bit better idea of what the actual weather observations are that apply to us as pilots. So, which category certain aircraft fall under, which category certain airports fall under, whether it's VFR, marginal, IFR, or low IFR. So when I look down here, let's start with the good. We'll look down here in the southern part of the country. We see a lot of VFR reports with skies clear. That's what the little white circle means, or some little bit of cloud coverage. Let's see here. San Antonio is reporting broken clouds at 25,000, 250. So they do have some clouds. They do have a ceiling, but it's 250, so it's really non-pertinent information. We see VFR conditions persist up until we get about halfway. Well, they do persist, but we do have some ceilings starting to come in. Overcast 7,000 about halfway up. What is that? New Mexico there. Yeah, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Utah. Got it. And then up in Colorado, we do also see some less than ideal weather. We see some strong winds, 290, 14 gusting 22, scattered layer at 3,500. Let's see, Gunnison is reporting broken at 3,000, overcast at 3,700. So they are just meeting the minimums for marginal. And their wind is very, very strong here. 250, 18 gust 27. Wow, that is very strong. As we move just a little bit north, weather really deteriorates. Eagle County here, visibility of 1.75 miles. Snow, overcast, 2,700. Hopefully that's some nice powdery snow for everybody that's wanting to go skiing. If we move here up into the northwest, where we talked about earlier, so Washington and Oregon area and panhandle of Idaho, we do see some really not great weather. So some marginal VFR here, scattered at 700, overcast at 1,400. While that is marginal, that is not weather that you can take off into as a VFR pilot. It's just not. And deteriorates. Pullman there is reporting pretty rough stuff. So lots of cloud coverage here in the northeast. As we move across the northern central part of the country, we do see up here, up by Illinois, that's not Illinois, Minnesota, apologies. Up by Minnesota, we do see some not great weather, and if we compare that against our synoptic chart, there was an included front just to the west there, so that's bringing in some low clouds here. Let's see, we've got overcast at 1,400. Winds are somewhat minimal, but as we move over into Wisconsin, we see similar, broken at 1,300, broken at 2,500. And then we move over here into the Michigan area. Detroit is reporting VFR, but that's because they have few at 1,000 scattered at 1,700. Now, of course, VFR is if the ceiling, an airport will report as VFR if the ceiling is above 3,000 feet. Few and scattered do not qualify as a ceiling. But there are still clouds close to the ground. As a VFR pilot, it's not recommended that you would take off into a situation like that, especially when you combine the rain and the low temperature. 5 degrees with the dew point of 4. Very low temperature there. Up in the northeast, we see a lot of precipitation. Some airports reporting VFR, but because they're filled in, we know that there is a ceiling. Ceiling here at Albany is 5,000 feet. No, sorry. The ceiling is the broken layer at 4,100, and above that, overcast at 5,000. Few clouds at 400 feet. Not smart to take off into as a VFR pilot, though it does. The airport is reporting VFR. We see just a lot of nasty crap up in here. Moving down, we see less preset, but there are some airports reporting low VFR. Lancaster is reporting 1.75 miles visibility with mist and overcast of 300. Really, really low IFR there. Moving down and to the west, we do see some airports reporting VFR, but some ceilings, and further down here across that weather coming over Florida and Georgia caused by the stationary front, we again see some less than VFR weather, right? Some no good stuff here going on. Okay, so that's kind of an overview of VFR versus IFR areas, right? Our big IFR weathers today and moving into tomorrow are the Northwest, Washington and Oregon, and the Northeast up there around New York and northeast of there, Michigan and the surrounding states, and then also southern Georgia, the eastern part of South Carolina, and northern part of Florida. Those are really our IFR, heavy IFR weather areas. We do have some areas, large swaths of VFR weather, but you've got to take a closer look to see if the ceiling requirements are met for either a local flight, or if you're going on a cross-country flight, can you maintain those VFR weather separation minimums for cloud clearance and visibility as you're on your trip, if you're going as a VFR pilot. We talked briefly about where there might be VFR weather, but low enough ceilings that it would be a no-go situation. Let's look now at the areas of IFR and what would make that a go or no-go situation as an instrument-rated pilot. So what we can do here is we'll pull up, really this time of year, one of the biggest things that you want to consider is the freezing level if you are going IFR and you will be in instrument meteorological conditions. Now, we'll hit those same spots that we just talked about, the big areas of IFR, which is the northwestern part of the country, northeastern part of the country, around Michigan, and then Georgia and Florida area. So if we look at our freezing level chart, we can try and discern, some of these lines are pretty darn close. Looks like this really jagged squiggly is saying it's freezing at the surface. And then the next one, usually these are in increments of 4,000 feet, but it looks like this is 4,000 here. Looks like in this part of the country, we just skip 4,000 and go straight to 8,000. So somewhere between Washington and Oregon, somewhere in between these two lines, the freezing level is anywhere from the surface to 8,000 feet. Which means you're going to be in icing conditions for most of that. At the type of altitudes that we fly at as, single or twin piston pilots, without equipment for flight into known icing, even if you do, there's probably going to be some fairly severe icing there. What we can also do here on the map, we can pull up our layers and we can look at some, let's start with SIGMETS. Don't see any SIGMETS in this area. We'll look at AIRMETS. We'll look at AIRMET Zulu. There we go. Okay. Ooh, we got a lot. All right, we'll get rid of the Tango and the Sierra. Get rid of the outlooks. All right, so we have several AIRMETS over here for Zulu, which is icing, freezing. Zulu update for ice and freezing level valid until the 3rd at 2100 Zulu. Let's see. Moderate ice between freezing level and flight level 200. Freezing levels between 5,000 and 10,000. Moderate icing is a big deal for light piston aircraft. We don't have the capabilities to deal with moderate icing. We also have, let's see, update 4 here. Moderate icing below flight level 180. Now this here, this AIRMET Zulu is in that area north of where we said the freezing level was on the surface, right? So that means lots of freezing, moderate freezing below 180. That's where we fly as general aviation pilots, in that area. Okay, so if we continue looking at these AIRMET Zulus, you can see that all of the areas that we talked about do have AIRMET Zulus current and active. So we just looked at the Northwest, the little blip right over Kansas we talked about earlier. Freezing level surface to 5,000. There's moderate icing between freezing level and 140. So moderate icing from the freezing level, which is somewhere between the surface and 5,000, all the way up to 140. Again, those are the altitudes at which we live as general aviation pilots. That would be a no-go area until the weather passed, or if you were certain that you would not be in visible moisture, right? Because what are the requirements for freezing? Well, at or below freezing level, at or above the freezing level, rather, temperatures are below freezing, and visible moisture, whether that's cloud or rain or something along those lines. So we've got an AIRMET Zulu up here around Michigan as well. Freezing levels somewhere between the surface to 6,000. Moderate ice between the freezing level and 15,000. Again, where we live, up here around New York. Moderate ice between freezing level and flight level 230. Freezing level is somewhere from the surface to 120. Let's see what's going on down here in Georgia and Florida. This is one where if we look at the freezing level chart, it's saying that cutting through Alabama up to North Carolina, the freezing level is 120. So as we go to the south, the freezing level down around southern Florida is all the way at 16,000, 160. 16,000. So somewhere in between there is where we're looking. My guess would be they say the freezing level is at 13,000. Let's see. Moderate ice between freezing level and flight level 260. Freezing level is 120 to 140. All right, so this is an area where, as an instrument pilot, if you're flying below the freezing level, it could potentially be a go situation. But when we look at what's causing that weather, the stationary front with a cold front going to the south. Now those are the weather systems that produce really some of the worst weather. And if we look at this stretches quite a ways. And it's very possible you could kind of pick yourself through some cells here or there, or choose some more moderate areas to fly through. But that would be a situation you would only want to fly through that weather if you've flown through a cold front before with a more experienced pilot. If we look at some other AIRMETS here, so Tango, AIRMET Tango, those are the turbulence AIRMETS. We can see this Tango update for turbulence high, moderate turbulence between 180 and 420. Let's see what this red one is. Low level wind shear. Low level wind shear. Yeah, that's not so good. So let's come over here and look at what some of these airports are reporting in terms of wind. Calm, which we often see with wind shear, that where wind is calm on the surface, but there's a huge disruption in the velocity or direction of the wind. So that's something that could add into the play of potentially being an unsafe situation. You don't want to fly that in that. You want to wait a couple days until that rolls out of the way. And then we can also bring up Sierra, of course. You can't see the IFR AIRMETS. Ceiling below 1,000, visibility below 3 miles, precipitation, fog, and mist. So if it were me and I were flying in a light piston aircraft, I would wait a day in this area. I wouldn't fly in this area. I'd wait a little bit for that weather to move out. Now, of course, in all those areas we talked about, we see those AIRMET Sierras for IFR conditions, which we know, and they vacillate between mountain obscuration, which if you're not instrument rated, you really need to look and see if those airports if you're not instrument rated, you wouldn't be able to do that. And if you are instrument rated, you'd need to look at your path of flight and make sure that all of the en route airports or your alternates meet your personal minimums in these areas. Because of course, as pilots, we're always thinking about contingencies. What if something fails? What if we lose our engine? What if I need to get on the ground immediately because I have to use the restroom or something along those lines? So you want to be sure that you're not putting yourself in a position to make a bad decision, that you're not boxing yourself in. So really all those areas would be kind of no-go areas for me personally. But let's look at some conditions with the VFR areas that might lead us to make a kind of do a double take there. So over Texas, we do see some high turbulence, moderate turbulence between flight level 180 and 420. Now, it could be very easy to dismiss that and think, okay, I'm a general aviation pilot. I'm not going to be up in the flight levels. But it's important to look at those and be aware that those high-level turbulence AIRMETS are present, because they do give some indication of the stability of the atmosphere and what's going on. Now, if we go up to North Texas here, we have some more low-level wind shear AIRMETS, low-level wind shear potential. All these orange ones are low-level wind shear. Here we see an AIRMET Tango for surface winds, sustained surface winds greater than 30 knots. That would definitely be a situation where you would need to compare the wind direction with the runway direction at your departure, your destination, and en route airports, because of, again, of course, contingencies, and decide if the wind has enough of a crosswind component that it's a no-go situation, and if the total wind component is out of your personal minimums. You know, of course, we talk about crosswinds as pilots and the capability of our aircraft, the maximum demonstrated crosswind of our aircraft, and our personal minimums in terms of what you're comfortable with and proficient with. But there should be a total wind component as well in your personal minimums. Let's look here over Southern California or Central California. We see low-level turbulence, moderate turbulence below 160, moderate turbulence below 160, and low-level wind shear. So, you know, it's easy to look at the observation, the METARs, the reports, observation reports at the airports, and think, okay, well, it's VFR, well, it's fine. No, not necessarily, right? There are a whole lot more considerations to take, many more considerations to take, rather than just are we VFR or IFR. For the most part, a lot of these areas of intense IFR weather, for me, would be a no-go. Now, of course, you have to really look at and analyze and synthesize the information where you are and where you're going. Because these big swaths are big picture, but you really have to get down into the details of your particular flight so you can make the best go or no-go decision for yourself and your mission. Let's see, was there anything else I wanted to look at? I think that covers it. So if we kind of do a little recap of what's going on, I'll just reload the map here. I'm gonna take off the AIRMETS and everything. Just gonna look at the METARs. And I'm gonna bring up the surface analysis chart as well. So if we just take a second to compare the surface analysis with the METARs and observations at the airports, we see there's a lot of lap over there, right? There's a lot of overlap. And we also see where there's a lot of the precip and low pressures and cold fronts and occluded fronts. My take is that those are areas where there would be a no-go situation. And your first inclination should be, this is a no-go. And then you find reasons to, the burden then becomes on proving that it should be a go situation. What that does is it frames your mindset to say, no go, I'm not going. I already know I'm not going. I have backup plans, or I've decided it's not a trip I'm going to go on. Let's see if I can delve into the information and find anything that is convincing enough, right? The burden of proof is on it being a safe decision. Find anything that's convincing enough against all of the no-go pieces to make it a go decision. Overwhelmingly, you'll find if that's the approach you take, you're going to be making no-go decisions pretty often. But as the old adage goes, I'd much rather be on the ground looking at the sky. And these are really unsafe situations. Now, As a student pilot or certificated pilot, you should know the dangers of icing and flying into thunderstorms and cold fronts and low-level wind shear and turbulence. This is not a weather course. This is simply another set of eyes looking at the weather to give you a more informed go or no-go decision. Now, if you have a flight coming up where you'd be interested in a one-on-one discussion and dissection of the weather and the conditions along your route of flight, I'd be more than happy to provide you some assistance there. You can always reach out to me from my website, gilbertaviation.com. I'll be happy to help you out. I do have some little stickers to send out, AeroSafe by gilbertaviation.com. If you leave a comment telling me what the current freezing level is at your home airport and 2 or 3 environmental conditions that would lead you to make a go or no-go decision, I'll reach out and send you a sticker that you can put on your flight bag or your headset or laptop or whatever else. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the discussion today. We'll look at the weather again later this week. Have a good one. Bye.